From now on, this place is mine, and frankly, this business needs real leadership, not emotional women trying to play boss. Mason's voice cut through the morning staff meeting like a blade, his chest puffed out with newfound authority. I sat there, watching my brother deliver his first speech as owner of McKay's Southern Kitchen, the restaurant I'd poured 12 years of my life into. My name is Sabrina McKay. I'm 36 years old, and until that moment, I thought I understood what betrayal felt like. I was wrong. The sting of his words wasn't just about gender. It was about erasing everything I'd built, every late night I'd spent perfecting recipes, every customer relationship I'd nurtured, every financial crisis I'd navigated while he was out charming investors and taking credit. I looked around the table at the faces I'd worked alongside for years. Jennifer, our head server, stared at her hands. Carlos, our line cook, shifted uncomfortably. Even sweet Bethany from the pastry station looked like she wanted to disappear. They all knew who really ran this place, who created the signature dishes that kept customers coming back, who balanced the books and managed the suppliers. "Any questions?" Mason asked, his smug smile making my stomach turn. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. I could feel everyone waiting for my reaction, expecting me to fight back, to defend my territory. Instead, I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the worn wooden floor. "Congratulations on your promotion," I said, my voice steady and calm. The words carried no sarcasm, no anger, just cold professionalism. Mason's smile faltered slightly, as if he'd been expecting a different response. I walked toward the door, my footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. Behind me, I heard Mason clear his throat, trying to regain his momentum. "Well, then, let's talk about the changes we'll be implementing immediately." But I was already gone, pushing through the kitchen doors one last time. The familiar smells of cornbread and collard greens, which had once felt like home, now seemed like ghosts of what used to be. I grabbed my purse from the office, my former office, and walked out the back door without looking back. The Charleston morning air hit my face, warm and humid, even at 9 a.m. I sat in my car for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. Mason thought he'd won something today. He thought he'd finally put me in my place, claimed what he believed was rightfully his as the eldest son. What he didn't realize was that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I'd been avoiding for weeks. "Hello, Mr. Patterson. It's Sabrina McKay. I'm ready to sign that lease." Growing up in the McKay family meant understanding your place in the hierarchy. My father, Thomas McKay, had built our restaurant from nothing in 1987, transforming a tired diner into Charleston's beloved McKay's Southern Kitchen. My mother, Patricia, worked beside him for 30 years, managing front-of-house operations with grace and warmth that kept customers returning generation after generation. Mason, being 3 years older and the only son, was always positioned as the heir apparent. Even as children, he got the choice cuts at dinner while I helped clear plates. When we both started working at the restaurant as teenagers, he was introduced to customers as the future owner, while I was simply Thomas's daughter who helped out. But helping out became my life's work. After college, while Mason bounced between sales jobs and entrepreneurial ventures that never quite took off, I moved back home and threw myself into the restaurant. I wasn't officially management, but somehow every crisis landed on my desk. When suppliers needed paying, they called me. When the health inspector showed up unexpectedly, I handled the walkthrough. When customers complained about service or praised a new dish, they asked for me specifically. I spent 5 years learning every aspect of the business. I modernized our inventory system, negotiated better contracts with local farmers, and created 3 of our most popular menu items, including the bourbon peach cobbler that food bloggers drove from Atlanta to try. I worked 60-hour weeks without complaint, skipping family vacations and social events because someone needed to mind the restaurant. Mason, meanwhile, had discovered his talent for schmoozing. He'd breeze in during busy Friday nights, work the dining room like a politician, and leave with phone numbers from potential investors or local business owners. Our parents loved watching him network, convinced his charm would take the restaurant to the next level. Sabrina's the detail person, my mother would say fondly. But Mason has vision. The irony wasn't lost on me. My vision had increased our revenue by 30% over 3 years. My details kept us profitable when other family restaurants in the area were closing. But Mason's charisma made him the natural choice for leadership in our parents' eyes. 2 months ago, when Dad announced his retirement plans, I'd foolishly hoped my years of dedication would finally be recognized. Instead, he called a family meeting to discuss transitioning ownership to Mason. I sat there watching my brother nod seriously, as if he'd been preparing for this moment his entire life, rather than showing up sporadically to glad-hand customers. "You'll be invaluable support for him," Dad assured me. "Every good leader needs a strong right hand." A right hand. After 12 years of being the backbone, I was being offered a supporting role in my own story. I smiled and nodded. But that night, I started making phone calls. If they wanted Mason to lead, he could learn to do it without me. The morning of Mason's official takeover, I arrived at the restaurant 2 hours early, just like always. The prep work still needed doing, the books still required balancing, and somebody had to ensure we had enough supplies for the lunch rush. I'd been McKay's Southern Kitchen's unofficial operations manager for so long that the routine was embedded in my muscle memory. I was reviewing vendor invoices when Jennifer arrived for her shift. "Morning, Sabrina. Big day today, huh?" She tried to sound upbeat, but I caught the uncertainty in her voice. The whole staff had been walking on eggshells since the ownership announcement, unsure how things would change under Mason's leadership. "Just another day," I replied, not looking up from the paperwork. But it wasn't just another day, and we both knew it. Today would mark the beginning of something entirely different, though Mason had no idea just how different it would be. Carlos came in next, followed by Bethany with her usual cheerful energy that even workplace tension couldn't diminish. Our tiny pastry chef had been with us for 3 years, ever since graduating from culinary school. She developed a loyal following for her honey butter biscuits and seasonal fruit tarts that perfectly complemented our southern menu. "Is Mr. Mason here yet?" she asked, tying her apron strings. "He'll be here for the staff meeting at 9 o'clock, I said. "You should probably know," I stopped myself. Whatever I was about to say wouldn't help anyone. These people needed their jobs, and warning them about Mason's management style would only create problems they couldn't solve. At exactly 9 a.m., Mason strode through the front door, wearing a new button-down shirt and slacks instead of his usual jeans. He'd clearly dressed the part of restaurant owner, right down to the expensive watch I'd never seen before. Behind him trailed our parents, both beaming with pride at their son's big moment. "Everyone to the dining room," Mason announced, his voice carrying new authority. We gathered around the large round table near the kitchen, the same spot where we'd held countless staff meetings over the years. But this felt different, formal, and uncomfortable in a way our workplace had never been. Dad made a short speech about family legacy and new leadership, then handed Mason a set of keys with ceremonial flourish. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Mason accepted the keys like he was receiving a crown, then launched into his vision for the restaurant's future. That's when he delivered his crushing blow about emotional women and real leadership. That's when 12 years of my life were dismissed with a few careless words. That's when I realized that staying would mean watching everything I'd built be claimed by someone who'd never earned the right to own it. So I stood up, congratulated him with perfect composure, and walked away from the only professional home I'd ever known. But I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I was walking toward something bigger. The drive downtown to Patterson Properties took 15 minutes, but it felt like crossing into another lifetime. 3 weeks earlier, I'd toured the empty storefront on King Street purely as a fantasy, a what-if exercise to help me cope with the frustration of watching Mason coast on my achievements. The space was smaller than McKay's Southern Kitchen, with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the interior with natural light. "Still interested?" Mr. Patterson asked when I called him from the restaurant parking lot. "More than ever," I replied, surprising myself with how certain I sounded. "Can you be here in an hour? I've got another party looking at it this afternoon." I'd been preparing for this moment without fully admitting it to myself. For weeks, I'd been quietly documenting everything: supplier contracts, customer preferences, recipe modifications I'd made over the years. I'd even taken photos of our most popular plating presentations, telling myself it was just for my personal portfolio. The truth was, some part of me had been planning an exit strategy since the day Dad announced Mason's promotion. The storefront was exactly as I remembered it: rough around the edges, but full of potential. The previous tenant had been a boutique that never quite found its audience, leaving behind elegant lighting fixtures and a half-finished kitchen that could be modified for a smaller operation. "What kind of timeline are you thinking?" Mr. Patterson asked as we walked through the space. "I need to be open within 2 months," I said, mentally calculating how long I could survive on my savings while building a customer base. "Is that possible?" He raised an eyebrow. "Ambitious, but this space has all the basic infrastructure you'd need for food service. The real question is whether you can handle the permitting and build out in that time frame." I thought about all the regulatory hurdles I'd navigated for McKay's over the years, all the health department inspections I'd managed, all the vendor relationships I'd cultivated. "I can handle it." We spent the next hour discussing lease terms and renovation requirements. The rent was higher than I'd hoped, but manageable if I kept overhead low initially. I'd have to be chef, manager, and marketing department all in one, at least until revenue could support additional staff. Walking back to my car, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I was about to bet everything on my belief that customers would follow quality food and genuine hospitality, regardless of the McKay family name. It was the biggest risk I'd ever taken, but it felt more honest than staying to watch Mason destroy what I'd spent 12 years building. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Are you okay? Mason's asking where you went." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I'm fine. Take care of yourself." The next 2 hours were a blur of phone calls and paperwork, lease agreements, insurance applications, contractor estimates for kitchen modifications. I called every vendor I'd worked with at McKay's, carefully explaining that I was starting a new venture and asking about their standard terms for new accounts. Most were surprised but supportive, especially Tony from Coastal Produce, who'd been delivering to our family restaurants since I was in high school. "About time you went out on your own," he said. "You've been running that place for years anyway." By the time I drove home that evening, I had a signed lease, 3 contractor estimates, and a business license application ready to submit. I also had a knot in my stomach the size of a dinner plate and the growing realization that I'd just made a decision I couldn't undo. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my front porch, watching the Charleston evening settle over the historic district. Tomorrow, Mason would start learning what it actually took to run a restaurant, and I would start proving that talent and dedication mattered more than family connections and entitled attitudes. The second week of Mason's reign at McKay's Southern Kitchen brought the first crisis. I heard about it through Bethany, who called me 3 days after I'd submitted my business license application. "Sabrina, I hope it's okay that I'm calling," she said, her voice nervous. "But we're having some problems at the restaurant, and I didn't know who else to ask." "What kind of problems?" I kept my tone neutral, though my pulse quickened. "Well, Mason changed our suppliers without checking the quality first. The cornbread yesterday was terrible. The cornmeal was too coarse, and it fell apart. We had 12 customers complain, and the greens aren't cooking right because he switched to cheaper ham hocks that don't have enough fat." I closed my eyes, picturing the disaster. Our cornbread recipe was legendary in Charleston, passed down from my grandmother and perfected through decades of trial and error. The specific cornmeal blend came from a mill in South Carolina that cost more than generic brands, but produced the silky texture our customers expected. "What did he say when you brought it up?" "He told me to stop questioning his decisions and figure out how to make it work." Jennifer tried to explain that customers were asking for their money back, but he said people complain about everything and we shouldn't cater to whiners. My stomach clenched. Those whiners were loyal customers who'd been eating our cornbread for years. They knew the difference between the real thing and a cheap substitute. "I'm sorry you're dealing with this," I said carefully. "But Mason's in charge now. He'll have to learn through experience." "That's just it," Bethany continued. "I don't think he wants to learn. He keeps saying the old ways were inefficient and that customers won't notice small changes if we market properly. Yesterday, he hired some marketing consultant who wants to rebrand us as upscale casual and add items like quinoa salads to the menu. Quinoa salads at a traditional Southern restaurant that built its reputation on authentic comfort food. I had to admire Mason's ability to miss the point so completely. Bethany, can I ask you something? Are you happy working there? The pause told me everything I needed to know. I love cooking, she said finally. And I love the regulars who've become like family. But it's getting hard to take pride in what we're serving when Mason won't listen to anyone who's actually worked in the kitchen. I understand, I said. And if you ever want to talk about other opportunities, I'm always here. After we hung up, I sat staring at my laptop screen, where I'd been working on menu concepts for my new restaurant. I'd planned to start small and simple, focusing on a few signature dishes done exceptionally well. But if Mason was already alienating customers and staff, maybe I could move faster than I'd originally planned. I called Carlos next, then Jennifer. Both conversations followed the same pattern: frustration with Mason's changes, concern about declining food quality, and careful questions about what I was planning for my new venture. I didn't recruit anyone directly, but I made it clear that talented people would always have a place with me. By the end of the week, I had 3 staff members asking detailed questions about my timeline. More importantly, I had a clear picture of how quickly McKay's Southern Kitchen was losing its way under Mason's leadership. He was changing everything that made us special while ignoring the operational expertise that kept us running smoothly. It was exactly the opening I needed, though I felt a pang of sadness watching my family's restaurant stumble. This wasn't how I'd wanted things to go. But Mason had chosen his path when he dismissed my contributions so callously. Now I would show him what real leadership looked like. 3 weeks into my new venture, I received a call that changed everything. I was standing in my future restaurant, watching contractors install new equipment, when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Miss McKay, this is Dr. Patricia Hricks from the Charleston Food Network Association. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. The Charleston Food Network Association was a prestigious group of local chefs, restaurateurs, and food writers who promoted the city's culinary scene. Getting their attention usually took years of established success. Not at all, Dr. Hricks. How can I help you? I've been hearing some interesting things about your new restaurant project. Word travels fast in our community, especially when someone with your reputation decides to strike out on their own. My reputation. I'd never thought of myself as having a reputation beyond the walls of McKay's Southern Kitchen, but Charleston's food scene was smaller and more interconnected than I'd realized. Several of our members have mentioned their experiences at McKay's over the years, she continued. Consistently, they've noted the exceptional quality of certain dishes and the operational excellence that kept the restaurant running smoothly. Many assumed you were the executive chef, given the caliber of the food. I was the operations manager, I said, choosing my words carefully. But I did develop several menu items and oversee quality control. That explains a lot. The reason I'm calling is that we have an opening in our autumn showcase event. It's typically reserved for established restaurants, but we occasionally invite promising new ventures to participate. Would you be interested in representing your new establishment? My heart hammered against my ribs. The Autumn Showcase was Charleston's premier food event, attended by food critics, tourism officials, and culinary enthusiasts from across the Southeast. Restaurants that participated often saw their reservations booked solid for months afterward. I'd be honored, I managed. But I should mention that we're still in the build-out phase. We haven't even had our soft opening yet. When are you planning to open? I did quick mental calculations. The contractors promised to finish kitchen installations by the following week. I'd need at least 2 weeks for staff training and recipe testing. 6 weeks from now, if everything goes according to schedule. Perfect. The showcase is 8 weeks out, which gives you time to work out any opening issues. I'll email you the details and vendor information. After she hung up, I stood in my empty dining room, barely believing what had just happened. Someone had recommended me for Charleston's most important food event based solely on my work at McKay's. Someone had noticed that the quality they associated with our family restaurant came from my efforts, not Mason's charm. I called my contractor immediately. Jerry, what would it take to move our timeline up by a week? Possible, but it'll cost extra for overtime crews. Why the rush? I just got invited to participate in the Charleston Food Network's Autumn Showcase. This could make or break the entire venture. In that case, let's make it happen. When do you need to be serving customers? 5 weeks from today. Jerry whistled low. You're cutting it close, but I like your confidence. Let me make some calls. As I drove home that evening, I realized that everything was accelerating beyond my original plans. I'd hoped to build slowly, establish a local following, and gradually grow the business. Instead, I was about to launch directly into Charleston's culinary spotlight. But maybe that was exactly what I needed. Mason had dismissed me as an emotional woman playing boss. In 5 weeks, I'd be serving food to some of the most discerning palates in the Southeast, representing everything I'd learned about hospitality and excellence over 12 years. Let him try to explain that away to our parents. McKay's table opened on a humid Thursday morning in October with no fanfare and no advertising budget. I'd chosen the name carefully, keeping the family connection while making it clear this was my establishment. The soft opening was intentionally quiet, just a few dozen customers who'd heard through word of mouth. Jennifer, Carlos, and Bethany had all given their notice at McKay's Southern Kitchen the previous week, timing their departures to coincide with my opening. I hadn't asked them to leave their jobs, but I'd made it clear that talented people would always have opportunities with me. They'd made their own decisions about where they wanted to build their careers. Our first customer was Mrs. Eleanor Davidson, an 82-year-old widow who'd been eating lunch at McKay's Southern Kitchen every Tuesday for 15 years. She'd heard about my new place through Jennifer and wanted to see if I'd maintain the quality she remembered. "Honey, I sure have missed your cornbread," she said, settling into one of our mismatched chairs. "That new boy at your daddy's place just doesn't understand what makes food special." I served her our signature dish, pan-fried chicken with bourbon glaze, accompanied by cornbread made from the same mill I'd used for years and greens slow-cooked with proper country ham. Her face lit up with the first bite. "This is it," she declared. "This is what I've been missing." Word spread through Charleston's network of food lovers faster than I dared hope. By Friday evening, we had a waiting list. By the following Tuesday, Mrs. Davidson had brought 3 friends. Carlos reported that customers were asking specifically for dishes I'd created at McKay's: the bourbon peach cobbler, the honey-glazed carrots, the cornbread that had become legendary among locals. "They keep saying the food tastes different at the old place," Jennifer told me during our Friday lunch rush. "Less soul, more corporate." I nodded but didn't respond. I wasn't interested in badmouthing Mason or the family restaurant. I was focused on building something positive, something that honored the traditions I'd learned while showcasing my own vision for Southern hospitality. The Charleston Food Network's Autumn Showcase arrived like a hurricane of opportunity and terror. I'd spent 2 weeks perfecting my presentation menu, choosing dishes that represented both traditional Southern cooking and my own innovations, the bourbon peach cobbler as my signature dessert, alongside pan-fried chicken with honey bourbon glaze and my grandmother's cornbread recipe with a modern twist, herb butter infused with local honey. The event was held at the historic Market Hall, with 24 restaurants representing the best of Charleston's culinary scene. I'd never participated in anything this large or public, but my staff was ready. Carlos had practiced our chicken preparation until he could execute it perfectly under pressure. Bethany's dessert presentation looked like edible art. Jennifer moved through the crowd with natural grace, explaining our dishes to curious attendees. Dr. Hicks found me during the evening rush, watching as food critics and local celebrities sampled our offerings. "Miss McKay, I have to tell you, your booth has generated more positive comments than any newcomer in the showcase's history." "Really?" I tried to keep the excitement out of my voice. The food speaks for itself, but people are also talking about the story. A talented woman leaving the family business to build something of her own resonates with a lot of our community members. As the evening wound down, I looked around at my exhausted but triumphant team. We'd served over 300 people, handed out business cards, and booked reservation requests for the next 6 weeks. More importantly, we'd proven that McKay's table belonged in Charleston's top tier of dining establishments. The next morning, I found a review in the Charleston Post and Courier's food section that made my hands shake. McKay's table brings soul back to Southern cuisine, proving that authentic flavors and genuine hospitality never go out of style. Mason called me that afternoon for the first time since I'd left. I let it go to voicemail. As I reflected on my journey from dismissed sister to independent restaurant owner, I realized that Mason's cruelty had actually been a gift. It forced me to discover my own strength and build something truly mine. The taste of that victory was sweeter than any bourbon peach cobbler I'd ever made.